Did you know that this cheese factory produces over 100 million pounds of cheese every year? From thousands of cows to massive cheese wheels, let's dive into the fascinating world of large-scale cheese production. The story of every wheel of cheese begins in the heart of dairy country, in sprawling, lush green pastures where cows graze on fresh grass. Imagine the soft bleating of cows and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. This is where it all starts. The first step in the cheese-making process is the collection of fresh milk. In the world's largest cheese factory, this happens on a massive scale. Every day, thousands of cows across numerous farms supply milk that is gathered into large holding tanks. We're talking millions of gallons of milk arriving at the factory doors, enough to fill dozens of Olympic-sized swimming pools. But the journey doesn't stop here. Each gallon of milk has to pass rigorous quality checks. Farmers test the milk for its fat and protein content before it even leaves the farm. This ensures only the highest quality milk makes it to the factory. With our milk ready to go, let's take it to the next stage: pasteurization. But don't go anywhere. This is where the magic truly begins. Pasteurization is the process of heating milk to a high temperature to kill any harmful bacteria, making it safe to consume and ensuring that every batch of cheese is as pure and clean as possible. In our massive factory, the milk enters enormous stainless steel vats, where it's heated to a precise 71.7 degrees for 15 seconds, just long enough to eliminate any potential pathogens. This process is crucial in mass cheese production because it ensures that each wheel of cheese is safe to eat while retaining its flavor and texture. During this stage, the milk takes on a sweet, creamy aroma, and the scent begins to fill the air as it flows through high-powered pipes toward the next stop: curdling. Now that the milk is pasteurized, we're ready for the next exciting transformation: curdling. But before we jump ahead, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer scale of what's happening here. This facility produces up to 500,000 pounds of cheese in a single day, enough to supply millions of sandwiches and pizzas worldwide. But the best part is yet to come. Once the milk is pasteurized, it's time for curdling. This is where the magic happens. The milk is combined with a bacterial culture and rennet, an enzyme that helps the milk to coagulate. The bacterial cultures work their magic, converting the lactose in the milk into lactic acid, which then causes the milk proteins to bond together. This process takes around 30 minutes, but you can already start to see and smell the transformation. The once smooth milk begins to solidify and curds start to form. Small, soft lumps that will eventually become the cheese we all know and love. The smell becomes richer, with that familiar tangy aroma beginning to rise from the vats. The curds and whey are then separated by cutting the curds into smaller pieces with specialized machines that slice through the curds with surgical precision. This process helps the curds release more whey, and it's a delicate balance. Too much cutting, and you'll end up with dry cheese. Too little, and it won't have the right texture. Once the curds are cut to the right size, they need to be cooked. This is another key moment in the process. The curds are slowly heated to a specific temperature, often around 130 degrees, 54 degrees, to help them firm up. As the curds cook, they begin to release more whey, and the texture starts to change from soft lumps to firmer, more cohesive pieces. As we continue the process, the anticipation builds. We're now closer than ever to seeing our milk transform into a massive wheel of cheese. But before we move to the next stage, it's important to note the role of the factory's cheesemakers. Skilled individuals who have mastered the art of cheese production. They watch the vats carefully, making sure every aspect of the curdling process is just right. This human touch is what sets high-quality cheese apart from mass-produced alternatives. But we're not there yet. Stay with us as we move on to the next chapter of this cheese-making journey: pressing. After curdling and cooking, the cheese curds are ready for pressing. This is where they begin to take shape. At the factory, the curds are placed into large, round molds, where they're compacted under tremendous pressure. The pressing process helps remove any remaining whey and gives the cheese its final form. It's a slow and steady process. The curds are pressed for hours, sometimes overnight, depending on the size of the cheese wheel being made. The pressure used during pressing is carefully monitored to ensure the cheese maintains its integrity. It's fascinating to think about the precision that goes into pressing each wheel of cheese. It's not just a simple squish. It's a delicate dance of force and time, measured in tons of pressure. Once the cheese has been pressed into a solid, unified mass, it's time for the next step: salting. But don't go anywhere yet. This is where the flavor really starts to develop. Salting is a key part of the cheese-making process because it not only enhances the flavor of the cheese, but also helps in preserving it. There are two ways to salt cheese: dry salting, where salt is rubbed directly onto the surface of the cheese, and brining, where the cheese is soaked in a saltwater solution. In this factory, a combination of both methods is used. The cheese wheels are first dry salted to ensure that the surface develops a nice, salty crust. Then, they're submerged in brine tanks, where they soak for a set period, usually around 24 hours. This helps the salt penetrate deep into the cheese, creating the perfect balance of salty and savory flavors. But there's more to salting than just taste. It also affects the texture. Salt helps the cheese retain moisture, which in turn affects how the cheese ages. With the salt now evenly distributed throughout the cheese, it's time to age. Now, we're getting closer to the end of the journey. Let's head to the aging room to see how the magic continues. Aging is where the cheese reaches its full potential. After the cheese is salted, it's moved to a temperature and humidity-controlled aging room, where it will sit for weeks or even months. The temperature is usually kept between 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is carefully maintained to ensure the cheese doesn't dry out. During the aging process, the bacteria and enzymes continue to break down the proteins and fats in the cheese, creating new flavors and textures. The longer the cheese ages, the sharper and more intense the flavor becomes. You can almost taste the history in every bite. The aging process varies depending on the type of cheese being made, but at the world's largest cheese factory, it's all about consistency. Each cheese wheel is carefully monitored, with cheesemakers performing regular checks to ensure everything is on track. The cheese is flipped regularly, allowing for even aging. When the time is right, the cheese wheels are ready to be sent out to distributors and retailers worldwide. After months of careful crafting, it's time for the cheese wheels to leave the factory and find their way to kitchens and restaurants around the globe. The cheese is carefully packaged, labeled, and sent off to warehouses and distributors. This massive factory doesn't just churn out cheese, it's an intricate operation involving cutting-edge technology, skilled workers, and an unrelenting commitment to quality. The cheese you see on your store shelves has gone through an incredibly detailed journey, from humble milk to a masterpiece ready to be enjoyed.